Ring. Oh, there she is. There's Hugh eating. Hey, Kristen,
We're just getting our technology set up here. Bear with us.
No worries. I was just getting
oh,
a
you're
little
coming in loud and clear.
I was in the wrong place.
It always surprises me when it comes out of there.
Next time I'll have my computer ready to go.
It's all good. Where's the? Here we go.
You saw Martha, right? I mentioned doing technology. If I cattle prodded her, I would not have gotten a more visceral reaction.
Okay, that's up there. I periodically have some.
We've got Nate with us, Aaron Ladd.
Got all the
from
gangs all
Ludlow.
there. I wish I
They're
went.
joining, and I'm hoping that we have no connection problem because we sometimes have connection problems.
Aaron, good to see you.
You too.
I'm good. I'm good.
Nate, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for the
Nate Fraser, Superintendent for wastewater in the town of Springfield.
I'll be right back, Chuck. Feel free to do something if you need to.
Aaron, I applaud your background. It's full of maps and other like planner-ish things. It looks great.
Oh, is she frozen on the phone?
All right.
Jill is from West Windsor. Bunch of the planning commission was very interested in this.
Jill? We have a bunch of people joining us right now, and I'm just admitting them into the Zoom room. Kristen, I recognize that awesome first slide. It's the winner. So we have a bunch of people. I'm going to admit all. Look at that.
Pretty.
We're having a few technical issues here. Bear with us. Stable.
Are people able to see my first slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Somebody tie into it using the iPad. I think actually the iPad might be the most stable rather than use this.
You can, I'm going to try to make Kristen a co-host too. What the heck?
We're going to make you a co-host, Kristen. So don't
Okay.
go crazy with all that power. All right, I'm going live right now. I'm joining the scoop on poop. And Jason's going to swing me over to. Right. So I think we can proceed now.
I think you're good.
And then if you remove that laptop, I think I'll just run it right off of this iPad.
This is connected to the owl. So I think I need to,
How do we get rid of this echo? I just kind of.
can you turn off your
Do that
volume?
join without audio, probably, from the iPad.
Technology.
I know. It makes every time this happens, it makes me feel better. Like
It's not just you, Deb. It's me. It's all of us.
it's just like, how do I just? I know everything's fine with it. Just
It's frustrating.
yeah.
We lost Chuck
He's trying to do the parking lot.
doing his audio thing.
So Jason, I think if we start now and stays the way it is, we're fine. If it breaks down, you've given me authority, so I just bring the iPad right here and we go to plan B. Does that
Yeah,
sound?
I think so. Yeah.
All right, Kristen, we're ready to go.
Okay. You want me to jump right in?
Martha and I will do an introduction. I will start with you are my favorite presentation every year at Muni Day. Usually it's chock-a-block full of information. I believe I've had 3 times I've seen versions of this presentation, and all 3 times I've learned something new. I'm excited to be able to share with my colleagues in terms of the Mount Scottney Regional Commission, all the planning and zoning administrators that we have here today. Thank you for being here. And I hope everyone finds it as useful as I've found it over the last couple of years. And Martha's going to read a summary of Kristen's background.
Yes, and thank you, Chuck, for suggesting this and setting it up, and Kristen for doing it. Kristen's an environmental analyst with DEC's Drinking Water and Groundwater Protection Division. She works with engineers, designers, and the public in permitting wastewater, potable water, and public water systems. Prior to working for the state, she was a high school STEM teacher and a college professor of physical science. She's been a geological and environmental consultant for various organizations and government agencies. She has an MS from the University of Rhode Island in geological oceanography and a BS from Eckerd College in physics and marine geophysics. She grew up in Massachusetts, mainly Cape Cod, but has come to call the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont home. Wow, without further ado, Kristen, you can take it away.
Thank you. And thank you for the invite for this. I always like to start off letting people know that I am available for these talks. I give everything from 15-minute presentations to 3-hour lectures. So sometimes it's a little hard for me to scale back from the 3 hours because I can keep going and fill a whole 3. So I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions on this one. So I was asked to do about 45 minutes. I'm hoping I hit that mark. Wastewater and water requirements, sort of with a zoning lens on them. Sorry, we were required to turn our keyboards in to the state of Vermont. And so I am waiting for my keyboard, my new one, to arrive from Amazon. So it's an unusual setup for me. I am representing today mostly the wastewater system and potable water supply program. We refer to it as the WW program. It is a regionalized program. It has 5 offices around the state. In St. Johnsbury, we have 1 regional engineer. In Essex, Montpelier, Rutland, and Springfield, there are 2 regional engineers assigned to each office. The wastewater system and potable water supply program regulates all soil-based wastewater systems and water supplies. It's for wastewater flows less than 6,500 gallons per day. It's not that when you reach 6,500 gallons per day, it suddenly is not allowed. It's that it jumps up to the indirect program. And the indirect program has some EPA reporting requirements that are not present at under 6,500 gallons per day. Those requirements come with a lot of extra costs, a lot of extra regulation, a lot of extra reporting. So a lot of times people are trying to actively stay below the 6,500 gallons per day. Potable water supplies, those are water supplies that are not public. Public water supplies are typically when you reach 25 users for a supply, it jumps up into the public water supply. This is also sort of, it's a gray area. We start looking at it when there's about 10 connections. Definitively when there's 15 connections. Municipal water and sewer connections, subdivision of lands, testing and education services for the licensed designer program in the public, and the review and approval of innovative and alternative wastewater products. When we look at this, this almost applies to every property in the state of Vermont. At some point in time, will likely connect with the WW program. Our permits run with the land though, so that there's a very good chance that they only connect with us once. Once they have their water supply and wastewater system approved, there's a good chance that that just continues to operate indefinitely. We have about 3,000 permit applications a year. We were down pre-COVID to about 2,500, and since COVID, we've actually sustained about 3,000 a year. About 10% of that, or about 300 of those permit applications, are for the replacement of failed wastewater systems. So wastewater systems that have surfaced, backed up into the home, or meeting the waters of the state, which are the definitions of failure, and need replacements of some kind. So a brief overview on how wastewater systems work, since that's what I'm going to focus on first. Wastewater systems start with you. It starts with your gut, right? You are breaking down solids in your gut into its components for your body to use. The process that that's actually going through is mostly an anaerobic bacteria process, right? Anaerobes are bacteria that thrive in a low oxygen or no oxygen environment, and they are really good about breaking down solids into their components because that's what they're actually looking for. They're looking for the oxygen and some of the other nutrients, and so when they do it to the food that we're eating, that they actually break it down and make it available for us. About 60% of your solid waste is alive and dead colonies of these anaerobes, right? So we're putting out into a septic tank or into a municipal system vast amounts of these anaerobes. And the first step to most wastewater systems, right, are as a septic tank. And that septic tank continues to reflect the anaerobic environment. So it's isolated, right? The solids fall out. We refer to them as sludge. They're isolated from any oxygen by a layer of water. The fats, oils, and greases, which once they hit the septic tank are referred to as scum, float to the top, further separating you from any oxygen. There's not a lot of turnover, right? And so this whole system settles out, and the anaerobic bacteria continue to break down solids in the septic tank. It's the reason you don't need to pump the septic tank every year. The EPA recommends every 3 years. That is actually based on sort of worst case scenario. You are putting out a vast amount of solids to need to pump every 3 years. If you monitor a tank, so I go out and dipstick my tank once a year when I clean the filter off, tanks can last up to 10, 12 years between pump outs, just by letting the anaerobes do their thing. Once we have the anaerobes breaking down the solids, what we're left with is some fairly nutrient-rich water, right? And so something needs to happen to that nutrient-rich water, and that's where the stage 2 of the wastewater system comes in. Stage 2, or on this one, it's stage 3. I started with digestion. Is the drain field or leach field. Those are interchangeable terms. And it switches from an anaerobic environment to an aerobic environment. And in the aerobic environment, the aerobic bacteria likes to take up the nutrients and make them biologically available to higher life forms, right? So this is an entire cycle. And what we're doing through the permitting process is we're ensuring that Mother Nature has the resources, the time, the space, the resources she needs to return water to groundwater in its clean state, right? If we didn't have this sort of process that we can take advantage of, the planet would be covered in poop. We have 8 billion people on the planet, 8 billion people throughout history, right? We have all of the animals on the planet. If Mother Nature had not figured out a way to take everything back to where it needs to be, it would be a planet of poop. So we are just giving her the time, the space, and resources she needs. And part of that is making sure that we have a nice oxygen exchange out in the leach field, because that aerobic bacteria, that oxygen-loving bacteria, needs the oxygen in order to take up the nutrients. Right, and I always like to add, why do we care about this? We are protecting human health and the environment. We are making sure that any wastewater that gets put out is clean before it gets taken up by a potable water supply. Right, and so that's typically referred to as the 2-year time of travel. Studies for the last about 120 years have all looked at this. They put a bunch of viruses, cysts, bacteria in an environment. They can do small environments, they can do large environments, they can do natural environments, they can do lab environments, and it all comes about the same. All of the little microbes are really good at trying to dominate each other. And so they've all developed ways to kill off their competition. And so if you put them all out there, after about 2 years, they've made it too inhospitable for any of them to survive, right? And so you have a complete die-off after about 2 years. And so we make sure that there's 2 years of travel between any wastewater that's getting put out in a leach field and any potable water supply, right? And that's one of the biggest components to some of the infill discussions in the villages, right? Is that we're trying to keep the water supply and the wastewater system separated enough that it takes 2 years for water from one to reach the other, right? In order to solve that problem, you don't need to solve it for both. Right, and I always like to emphasize this when I'm talking to villages that are looking at infilling. You don't need to solve both your water and your wastewater, right? You just need to take one of them out of the equation. The easiest one to take out of the equation is actually the wastewater, right? Because a wastewater system, as long as it's under the 6,500 gallons per day, typically once it's installed, there might be some annual or biannual maintenance, but it's not being regulated and monitored 24/7, right? And so it's a lot easier to install and sort of let it do its thing. Water supplies require 24/7 monitoring, right? We need to make sure that the water supply we're generating is healthy for the users at all ends, right? And so a lot of times it's a lot easier to take the wastewater out of the equation and let the potable water supplies that are existing continue, because we've now moved wastewater far enough away that it's not a concern for any of those potable water supplies. Right, and the other reason we do this, right, is for the environment. We like to make sure all of the nutrients and pathogens are taken up before they reach surface water, because once they reach surface water, they become a source for either algae blooms, right? This is when you have the fish kills, the eutrophic, the blue-green algae that can contain toxins, right? We don't want any of the excess nutrients or viruses making it to the surface water. You guys, by the way, can stop me at any time. I'm happy to answer questions throughout this. So looking at the leach field specifically, we want to make sure that the water is getting dispersed in the top 3 feet, because we know that's where the best oxygen exchange happens, right? And we want the oxygen to be there for the aerobic bacteria. And so we make sure that the leach field is in the top 3 feet. We make sure that there's 3 feet of separation between the base of the stone and seasonal high water. And so if you're looking at this, if you're not familiar with a leach field, right, typically a traditional leach field, as we now define them in Vermont, if you talk about tradition, there's a wide variety here, right? I've been out in places where it used to be the common practice back in the 1930s and 40s and into the 50s. People would bury their cars as their leach field and just roll down the windows. So I have been out and seen some interesting leach fields. But if we go for more of the common definition of traditional, right, it is a perforated pipe embedded into some stone. The stone acts as both a place for water to run through, and the stone acts as a place for the aerobic bacteria to adhere to as the water passes over it. Right, and so at the base of the stone, we want to make sure that there's 3 feet of separation. Studies show that most of the nutrients get taken up in the first 6 inches below the stone. So by the time you hit 6 inches below, you're at about 80 to 90% of the nutrients have been taken up. Right, by the time you hit a foot, you're approaching 100%. Typically by the time you hit 18 inches, you're at 100%. The reason why we have the 3 feet of separation is because we want to make sure that when we have excessively high water volume events, not this year, obviously, because we're all in a massive drought, but in previous years, right? I live in St. Johnsbury, when we got 21 inches of water over the course of like 6 hours, right? We wanted to make sure that there is some factor of safety so that the ground could absorb those high level events without it affecting the treatment that's happening in the leach field. We also make sure that there's 48 inches of separation to bedrock. The reason because water is being pulled down by gravity. And if it can't go down because it's hit bedrock, it starts to go out laterally, but it goes out laterally slower than it comes down. Right, and so if it starts to go out slower, it ends up actually bulging up a little. And so if you have bedrock that's a little too high, the bulge that this can create in this seasonal high water table underneath can actually start to interfere with those 18 inches that you need. Right, and so we want to make sure that bedrock is far enough down that there's some capacity for the water to move out laterally. Once you hit seasonal high water, you're returning into an anaerobic environment, right? The oxygen's being pushed out by the water. And so that's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that there's that separation from seasonal high water. Nutrients that are going out get used up, right? And the bacteria survive for a while, they die off. It starts to create what we refer to as the biomat. If you've ever dug into a leach field, you'll notice that some of the stone looks black. It's supposed to look black. That's the biomat. It's the natural process that goes through. Sometimes if you're putting out too much nutrients, your biomat gets too thick and water again can't get pulled down by gravity, and so it starts to back up and bulge. And when that happens, that's when it surfaces and is considered a failed leach field. Right, and so once that happens, the only thing you can do really is to move to a different location because the biomat has really integrated itself into the soils. Any questions on how the system sort of works? This is a very high overview, down and dirty. Okay.
Well, I guess the only question I have when I look at the biomat is if you had to, so I hear what you said, move it, but you're saying like in this picture, the biomat looks like a layer, so it's not something I could just dig up. And you know, it's more integrated than what the slide kind of shows.
It is more integrated than what the slide shows. So it's
Okay.
filling this pore spaces in the soils going down.
Yeah.
And out. It'll actually cover quite a bit of lateral space as well, and then it starts to back
Okay.
up until you
Yeah.
hit the bottom of the pipe, typically.
Okay.
So when designing wastewater systems, start with looking at the soils, right? We want to know what the soils can handle, what the soil profile is really going to define everything we can do about a wastewater system on a particular piece of property. So we dig these test pits, and the first thing we look at when we're looking at the test pits is where is seasonal high water? Seasonal high water is typically determined in the state of Vermont by the redoxamorphic features within the pit. And the redoxamorphic features are that transition from that nice rust color to soils that are depleted in the rust color, right? And so the rust color comes from the oxidized iron in soil. And I've been out to sites and we'll have the landowner sometimes sitting there, and the landowner, right, we don't see a lot of the rust color. And the landowner is like, well, maybe my soils just don't have a lot of iron in them. Turns out iron is constantly raining down on a geologic timescale and covering the entire planet, right? About 80% of iron in our soils is cosmogenic in origin, right? It's coming from space. So the space dust is raining down, constantly covering it and integrating into our soils. It's the reason why if you go to places that are particularly arid, right, you'll have beautiful red soils, right? If you think of sort of arches in the Midwest, a lot of the national parks out there, right, those beautiful red, that's because it's nice and arid. There's not a lot of water present, and so they hold on to their oxidized iron. Same thing with the louses in China. And if you really start driving around, like I do as the geologist, right, and you start looking at the crosscuts as you're driving around Vermont, New England, you're going to start seeing that beautiful red color in your soils. Right, and so this red means that you have oxygen, right, because that oxygen had to be there in order to oxidize the iron. And so now you have a type of iron that's rust, it's beautiful, it indicates that there is oxygen present. We can put a wastewater system there, right? And we'll get lots of treatment. If you look down here, this gray soil is the background mineral matrix. And what it indicates is that water has come up, stayed long enough to drive off the oxygen, change the microbic colonies from aerobic to anaerobic. The anaerobic bacteria actually uses the oxygen that's attached to the iron for life, and it changes that iron into a different type of iron. The different type of iron is water soluble, and so it then ends up dissolving into the water and leaching away when the groundwater drops, right? And so if we have this sort of background color instead of the iron red color, it means that water has come up, stayed long enough to put things into an anaerobic environment and leached the iron away. And it's happened frequently enough that you're now depleted of all of your iron. Right, and so that transition level of when you're going from the oxidized soil to the reduced soil below, where that sort of transition happens is where we say, okay, that's where our seasonal high water is. That's where water is coming up frequently enough, often enough that it's been depleted. There's a little bit of wiggle room here, right? Two people can be in a pit and I could say, oh yeah, we're having that depletion at 21 inches. Somebody else might say, oh yeah, I see it over here at the 17 inches. Typically you can have up to about a 4 to 5 inch range. If you're going more than 4 or 5 inches, let's have a bigger discussion. But there is a bit of a range here, and that's again playing into the fact that we have that 3 feet built into the rules so that, right, if there's a 4-inch disagreement between a designer and an engineer out on a project, it's sort of built into our factor of safety. Right, right? So typically though, I try to shoot for somewhere in the middle. The other thing we're looking at when we're looking at it, once we've determined seasonal high water, is we're looking at the texture of the soils, right? And so textures typically fall on a range of 3 different scales. There's sand, silt, and clay. Sand is your larger soil particles, right? And they're the gritty ones. They're the ones I can feel with my fingers. They also have a lot of pore space between them, and so water runs nicely through sand. Think of when you're at the beach, you pour a bucket of water onto the sand, right? It runs away quickly. If you go to the other end of the scale, right, we're talking clay. Clay particles are significantly smaller, and they also, any mineral that's going to break into anything that's small is also platey. And so they end up being these little plates, right? And they come together and they stick together because typically an electron gets knocked off at some point. So you got a positive side and negative side, so they stick together. And when they stick together, they don't let water through, right? It's the reason why we make pots out of clay. They hold water incredibly well. And so we don't want a lot of clay because it's going to keep water from moving through the surfaces, right? And being exposed to the anaerobic bacteria. We don't want too much sand sometimes because things will move a little too quickly. We actually like a nice mix of the sand, the silt that's in between the silt and the clay. I mean, the sand and the clay. And clay, just a little bit of clay, slows things down, right? The sand keeps things moving. We like that nice little variety. That's ideal. Right, well, that's one of the things we're looking for is what exactly is the texture, because it's going to indicate how much water can I put out square foot wise and will be absorbed without surfacing. Once the soils have been determined, the licensed designer is going to figure out how much wastewater is going to get used or how much water is going to get used. This is true for both ends. It's referred to as the design flow. In the state of Vermont, we determined that to be 70 gallons per person per day. I always have people say, right, I don't use 70 gallons. And I don't use typically on any given day 70 gallons. But one, you don't want to be using 100% of your allotted design flow, because if you do, that means that you have a really hard time doing things like hosting Thanksgiving dinner because you won't have enough water to absorb your guests. Right. And so you shouldn't be going over about 75% of your design flow on any given day. I also let people know, right, I have had the teenager in the house. The teenager is using 70 gallons per day. And so we want to make sure that whoever buys this house, they can move in with a house filled with teenagers, and this system is still going to work for them, right? Because the teenager's taking the hour-long shower and doing the loads of laundry for one shirt that's set on this high thing because they don't know how to adjust the water level in the washing machine. We've all been there, right? They're using their 70 gallons per day. My teenager was not only using her 70 gallons per day, she was using a little bit of my 70 gallons per day. And our system could absorb it because we have these sort of factors of safety built in. In the state of Vermont, there's a 2-bedroom minimum for the first unit on a property, right? After that, if you have additional units on the property, they can go down to 1-bedroom units. But the first unit on a property is considered to be a 2-bedroom unit. There is considered to be 2 people in the first 3 bedrooms as a minimum, right? And 1 person can be in any bedroom after that as a minimum. I let people know though, right? We have occupancy on our permits, right? There's an implied occupancy on some of the older permits before we started spelling it out. It is built in, however, to every permit we issue. If you are going over the occupancy, if you know you're going to go over your occupancy, this is particularly true around the lakes and at the ski resorts, right? Where the 3rd or 4th bedroom is suddenly going to become a bunk room, right? And you're going to put 4 bunk beds in there. Tell us that. Tell your licensed designer that. They will build you the water supply and wastewater system that matches what you intend to use that building for. And we will put that into your permit. So you could have a 4-bedroom, but 15-person occupancy if you have the supporting water supply and wastewater system. Right, and to just sort of give an example, right, a 3-bedroom house at 3 bedrooms, 2 people per bedroom, 70 gallons per day brings us to 420. If we add on a 2-bedroom ADU, that's 2 bedrooms at 2 persons per day at 70 gallons for another 280, bringing us to a total of 700 gallons per day. Once you know how much water and we know what the soils can absorb, we start looking and where the seasonal high water is, we start looking at what sort of system can we put in on any particular property. The first thing we're going to look at is the profiles. The profiles are sort of being driven by that seasonal high water. So if we have nice, deep seasonal high water, we have a nice, deep bedrock, right? We can put an in-ground system in. So we dig it in, we lay out our system, we cover it all back up. Nobody ever has to know it's there, right? This is the system that everybody wants. Nobody ever has to know. You can put your playground right over it. It's good to go. If you're exactly 3 feet to seasonal high water or exactly 4 feet to bedrock, you can just move off the organic layer, lay out your system, cover it up. It sort of looks like a little natural blip. This is known as an at-grade system. When you don't have 3 feet to seasonal high water and you don't have 4 feet to bedrock, suddenly we have to start manufacturing that separation. Right, and so that's when we bring in some sand and soils and we build mounds, right? Mounds are those, I'm sure you've all seen them, right? They're nice systems that come up and everybody sort of knows where your leach field is. It's building that artificial separation. If you don't have room for the side slopes on a mound, right? We refer to them as the toes. If you don't have room for this, you can do a bottomless sand filter, which is the picture right here, right? And a bottomless sand filter I like to refer to as a mound in a box. You're doing the exact same thing. You're building the 3 feet of separation you need to the seasonal high water. And you're just doing it without having those sort of natural sidewalls. You're building artificial sidewalls. Traditionally, those sidewalls have been built out of pressure-treated lumber. It has been sort of pioneered down in southern New England and is slowly making its way up here into Vermont using concrete instead of pressurized lumber. This is particularly being driven by the current cost for lumber. Concrete is now actually cheaper and easier to manufacture. And so you're just building the sidewalls, building that separation. Bottomless sand filters, because we sort of need their walls to be working, do have an annual inspection requirement. Mounds do not. For both of these, they're their own replacement location, right? So if you have a mound or you have a bottomless sand filter, because we can essentially scrape them off and bring in all new material, for these two, you don't need to identify a replacement area, right? If you're an in-ground or an at-grade, because you're infiltrating into the natural soils for your biomat, there's no way to sort of get it all. And so those need replacement areas, but mounds and bottomless sand filters do not. Another option in Vermont that I think is widely underutilized, and I think it's a shame that it's underutilized, is this one right here. This is known as a drip dispersal system. Drip dispersal systems, instead of using this 4-inch perforated PVC pipe, instead, if you were to look at it, looks like garden hose, right? It's otherwise completely indistinguishable from a garden hose. It's a garden hose that's been pinpricked roughly every inch, right? And because it has incredibly small holes and it does require a pump station to sort of keep the whole system pressurized, it prevents the freezing component to it. You can just take off the organic layer and you can lay these out. It sort of acts like an underground irrigation system. One of the super nice things about this is, right, for the traditional leach fields, you need to sort of remove anything that's going to have a taproot. So you have to make sure it's devoid of bushes and trees, right? Anything that's going to get in and block your pipes, any of those roots, they're going to find those holes. Because the holes are so tiny and everything's pressurized with the drip dispersal system, you can actually wrap them around trees, right? So you could put this through an orchard. You could put it through arboretum. You can put it right through, the town green. Could essentially become a leach field when you're using some of the drip dispersal systems.
So with the drip dispersal, are you trying to uptake the nutrients with the vegetation or the trees? I mean,
So you are taking advantage of the fact that they're closer to some of the organic layers, and so the grass does a much better job of taking the nutrients. In fact, that's what's been shown in some recent studies, is that instead of needing 6 inches, you actually shorten that because so much of the nutrients are being drawn up into the vegetation directly above. You also, surprisingly, it did a better job because it's fine misting essentially the soils. It spread them out better, and they had a better chance of eliminating all of the pathogens. So it had a higher pathogen reduction in a smaller time and space frame with the drip dispersal. We have what are known as innovative alternatives systems in Vermont. These come in mainly 2 flavors. So the first flavor are innovative alternative dispersal systems. The classic innovative alternative dispersal system is the one that's most commonly used in Vermont, the Presby pipe. Actually no longer called the Presby pipe as of last year. It got bought by a different company, and they didn't buy the name. So it's now being called EnviroSeptic pipes. I kind of like to use the Presby because Presby pipes were invented and are still manufactured in northern New Hampshire. One of the reasons why they're so popular in Vermont is because they can be locally sourced. The second reason is because they were designed for a similar landscape. The nice thing about innovative alternative dispersal systems is that you can hand carry them to your site, right? Where sort of that traditional leach field requires large beds of stone. So you need to be able to get, right, a large ton truck filled with some of this stone to your site in order to make it into a leach field, right? It sort of eliminated a lot of areas in New Hampshire and subsequently in Vermont that you could put a leach field, right? Because you just couldn't get something somewhere. You couldn't get that big truck full of stone somewhere where you wanted to put a leach field. That's eliminated with Presby pipes. They act as the stone and pipe system, right? And so this is the Presby pipe. It's perforated all the way around. It's wrapped in this proprietary geotextile fabric that acts sort of like the stone. They get laid out similar to a regular traditional system, right? Except you don't have any of the crushed stone, and the whole thing can get buried. These can be put in mounds, at grades, or in-ground systems. The only thing that you can't do with these ones is the bottomless sand filters. You can, however, put the drip dispersal, by the way, into bottomless sand filters, mounds, in-ground, or at grades. This one is another variety. This is an infiltrator. I like to call it the Quonset hut. It's perforated all the way around. It has an open bottom. It has a pipe that runs along it. Again, it's acting in the same capacity as the stone and pipe is, but you can hand carry it to the site. These have now blown open. There's one that looks like a mattress. There's one that looks sort of like a box, right? There's now about 8 different flavors of these, but they're all doing the same thing. They're just easy, lightweight, portable stone and pipe replacements. The other flavor we have for innovative alternative are innovative alternative treatment systems. The treatment system is providing an aerobic environment before the wastewater hits the leach field, right? And so by providing an aerobic environment prior to hitting the leach field, we can actually get water about 80 to 90% clean before it hits that leach field. Some of them claim that they get the water so clean that it's drinkable. In fact, there's at least 2 of the companies that are approved in Vermont that require their salespeople to drink the end product. I would not recommend that. Mainly because it doesn't guarantee or do anything for the pathogens, right? So our viruses, our cysts are not eliminated through this process. The only thing that's being eliminated is the nutrients. So water comes in at one end, and right, they all operate on the same sort of component. Wastewater comes in. Oxygen is somehow mixed with the wastewater along with aerobic bacteria. The nutrients get taken up. The bacteria settle to the bottom. What's left behind is mostly clean water. Right, so this one does it with injecting bubbles down below with a stir. All of them monitor the wastewater product to make sure that they're doing a good job. This one, the bubbles are injected below a media. The bacteria, the aerobic bacteria grows on the media and takes up the nutrients. This one, the wastewater is sprayed over the top of the media and it drips down past it, and the clean water collects down here. Right, has a recirculating pump, so if it needs to, it can send water through a couple of times before it sends it back out. This one uses an organic media. Typically, organic medias are going to be either peat moss or coconut fiber. But it's just doing the same thing as the synthetic media. It's spraying off over the top, wastewater drips through. There's an oxygen pump, making sure that we have a nice oxygen-rich environment. The water drips through, nutrients get taken up. Because you have so much of the nutrients getting taken up here, we allow a reduction in the size of the leach field because we're no longer counting on the leach field to do most of the cleaning, right? The leach field is now just doing the final polish. So it only needs to take up 20 to 10% of the nutrients that are left. So you can reduce the size of your leach field by up to 50%. You can also reduce your separation to seasonal high water because, right, we don't need quite as much of a factor of safety anymore. You can reduce that by 50% as well. So now you only need 18-inch separation to seasonal high water and a 50% smaller footprint. This is also a way that if you have a leach field and it's a perfectly functioning leach field and you wanted to double the capacity for that system, you can often put along the treatment train an innovative alternative treatment unit and double the amount of design flow for that leach field, right? One of the downsides with innovative alternative treatments is that they do require at least annual maintenance. I tell people it's like buying a car, right? It's going to need an annual inspection. We need to make sure that everything is working because we're counting on this to be functioning and not overwhelm your leach field. Otherwise, you're going to shorten your lifespan of your leach field by over 50% if it's able to absorb the water at all, right? And so we need this system to be working. It's going to require an annual inspection. Again, much less than a water supply system, right, which is going to require regular maintenance and a 24/7 presence. This one can just be that annual inspection. Different units are sized for different design flows. We have ones that are approved for anywhere from 200 gallons per day up to 50,000 gallons per day. Right, and so this could take on some of our wastewater treatment systems can take on an entire village without breaking a sweat, right? Which would reduce the size of your required leach field by 50%, as well as your separation to seasonal high water.
So, Kristen, this is the kind of system that would allow us to scale up. If we had a PUD in an area, rural area, we wanted a septic system that had capacity. This is kind of one of the treatment systems we'd look to.
It is, yes.
Okay, so in this case, for town planners, one of the things we're discussing is that we have conventional wisdom says density is controlled by septic, and that's not untrue. It's just a more nuanced answer in 2025 than it was, say, in 1995. Correct. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess the one follow-up to that is, so this is great, but if you were to do a system, something like this, is it still true that once you got over 25 houses or something, the municipality would have to own it or something like that?
No.
No.
So if you're over the 6,500 gallons a day, it can still be it's just on the backs of whoever's attached to it. I would
Okay.
keep it under the 6,500 gallons a day because it becomes less burdensome,
Okay.
right? But you could break up. You could have an entire village. So we also have what's known as a step system, right? So you turn your septic tanks essentially into pump stations, right? And so the solids settle out there and you're only transporting the liquids. You could bring an entire village together into a single treatment on some of the ones that are bigger. You could do it smaller, you could do it bigger, right? There's a lot of choice here. But let's say you do it to one big one that can take 10,000 gallons. You can then separate that 10,000 gallons out into multiple leach fields, so long as each leach field is hydraulically separate, right? So there's far enough distance that they're not going to influence each other.
Yeah.
And keep it under the 6,500 gallons per day.
Okay, great.
And then it does not have to be municipal in any way, shape, or form.
So is the trigger, the 6,500 gallons per day is what turns it into something that the municipality has to manage?
A little. Oh yeah, a little. The 6 for wastewater, right?
Yeah,
The 25, the 15 connections, 10 connections, 25 people is true for water supplies, right? So again,
Okay.
you get triggered into a water supply situation where it's municipal much faster.
Okay, understood. That's what I was missing. So thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, no problem. So this is right. You can have everybody could have their own wells, and then a community, and it doesn't have to be the town, could figure out a way to deal with their wastewater.
Yeah.
And that's something like 90 butts. You know, you 90 souls could actually operate under 6,500. Is that about right?
Yep.
Okay, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yes,
That
it
was
is.
gonna be my question. 90 people is about a 6,500
Yeah.
gallon system.
So when a
It is right. And
PUD,
again, you could bring it together to treat it. So if you wanted to only build one treatment unit, and then further separate it out into multiple leach fields.
yeah, wow,
Interesting.
There's a lot of right. You can get creative here. There's enough tools in the toolbox to really. There's very few pieces of property you couldn't design for. That's the two times that we really start running into a property is not eligible. One, it's covered in wetlands, which is not my program. And wetlands can say you can't build here. The other one is slope. The state of Vermont has determined basically anything more than a 20% slope. There are some times you can go up to 30% if a property was subdivided far enough in the past. But you can't go over a 20% slope and put a leach field. That's not science-based. That is entirely legislated. That was a choice that Vermont made. Otherwise, I can almost always come up with a solution.
Seems to me that this would be more for like multiple dwellings, or is it geared towards, single homes? I mean, it seems like this would be fairly expensive technology for, a single payer, a single system.
The treatment systems, it sort of depends on the property. We have single systems, right? So they go down to about 200 gallons per day.
Okay.
And we have them that'll get used, particularly popular around the lakes, right? Where subdivision happened long ago. Right. And they're trying to get things as small as possible on their property. They will put a single unit in. They do range in price right now from about $10,000 to $40,000. The state of Vermont does not care which end of that price range you are. They all work equally well. Right. I tell people again, like buying a car, you can buy the Ford Pinto or you can buy the Cadillac. each one is going to get you to work. So we don't particularly care. It is a cost burden, right? Again, there's an annual inspection piece, which is going to cost money. So there is a cost burden. I try to keep it as low as I have control over, and I do that by requiring that each and every one of these has 3 financially independent service providers at a minimum, so that there's some competition in the marketplace. That's the only tool I have in my toolbox to control the price of them.
I would assume that there's media change out, and
There is.
appears to me to be similar technology to what we have in the wastewater field, like RBCs or trickling filters.
MBRs. Yep, absolutely. In fact, MBRs are now sized down to a single family residence.
Right.
So that's why it actually helps to group people together because it takes off that cost burden. As long as you are grouping people sort of under that 6,500, there is savings and economy, right? So we're actually seeing it a lot around the lakes right now, right, where the infill was too tight. They're often buying a piece of property, on the other side of the road, and 10 homes will come together, put a step system, pump it across the road, treat it, and disperse it in the property across the street. And I've even seen now where they're then using that property, right? So I've seen them put a community playground on top of their leach field across the street for all 10 houses to use.
Okay.
So it opens up a lot of ability to collaborate if you can get there.
Right. Right, so just as a refresher on the scope of the rules, we regulate systems that are 6,500 gallons per day or less and all municipal connections to water and sewer. When we're connecting to water and sewer, what we're permitting is to make sure, one, that everything actually flows in the direction it's supposed to. You'd be surprised how many times we get plans where water is expected to flow uphill without a pump station to assist it. Right, and we have to, where the checkbox, it says, maybe that's not the best plan here. We also make sure that water and wastewater are separated by at least 10 feet, right? Because we know that these systems leak. And so we want to make sure that this leak in your water supply is not getting too close to the leak in your wastewater system, that there would be some cross-contamination. And so we do that with 10 feet of separation. And then we also make sure if you do have any components, right? So if you did decide that your wastewater system was going to be taken up by a municipal step system, which is an option, right? We're going to make sure that the septic tank that you were putting in as your septic tank to then connect into the step system is sized appropriately for your house. And we do the construction, modification, and replacements of buildings, structures, campgrounds, and associated wastewater systems and potable water supplies. We are the only permit that's universally required across the state for any of these components. So we try to give feedback on some of the other stuff, just as FYI. Although we don't actually regulate any of the other things. I'm just gonna, conscious of time. So the purpose of the rules, right, I already mentioned: protect human health and the environment, regulate design, construction, modification, operation, and maintenance of wastewater systems, increase the accountability of designers and installers. Designers in the state of Vermont are licensed. We have 4 classes of license that determines what you can work on. Everything from just being able to do a single family residence with an in-ground system up to PEs, which can pretty much design anything. Installers in the state of Vermont are not licensed. We're one of the few states that have on-site wastewater systems that does not have a license program for installers. I am trying to close that loop. I have worked with now the Vermont State University, used to be VTC, but now Vermont State University. We have created a certification program with them for installers. We have about 40 certified installers now in the state of Vermont. We can't require that an installer be certified,
right? Because that's edging too close to the licensure. But we do have on our website a list of people who we at least know have read the rules at some point and been introduced to them at, in a class. Service providers also have a certification program. It is not, again, required, but we highly recommend it. A lot of the service providers for the innovative alternative technologies have come in and become certified through the Vermont State University program that we set up. But the service providers are determined by each technology. This is, again, something I'm working on changing, but I haven't quite been able to get it across the finish line. We ensure owners know their responsibilities and have a knowledge of systems design, operation, and maintenance. We do frequent reach out. We do public things like this. We have fact sheets on our website. We do mass emailings, mass mailings. We also make sure we were the first program in the state to have every single one of our documents available to the public, online, searchable by individuals. This includes all of the plans, permits, correspondence, including any of their deficiencies, are all publicly available online. And we regularly have people call up saying, I don't know where my wastewater system is. We find the permit, we pull it up for them, we send them all of their documentation and the links so that they can get everything. This includes about 150,000 permits issued for the state of Vermont since this program began in 1970. We were the first environmental permitting program. Right, and so when you're doing about 3,000 per year, it adds up over the course of the decades, and we're at about 150,000 the last time I pulled the number. All of those permits run with the land unless site conditions have changed, which then make them invalid, right? And so if you do something to your property that no longer makes it hospitable to the approved water supply and wastewater system, you sort of nullified your own permit. Otherwise, once we issue a permit, that permit is good for construction in perpetuity. And then we establish the performance criteria, right? So this is the non-failing systems. We make sure that wastewater is not exposed to the air backing up in the building, no direct discharge to surface waters, and does not contaminate a potable water supply. Is there a question? No? Okay. The green box popped up around somebody, so. And we encourage innovation and flexibility in design. I can't assure it, right? I can't force designers to be innovative and flexible, but we encourage innovation and flexibility in design. Permit requirements, right, include the plans. On these plans, I like to show it because we have the water supply has to be shown. It's going to have a diagram of the pump. It's going to have what the line between the well and the house is going to look like. If this was a municipal line, it would show you the municipal line and same thing. Then you have the house. We don't need to know the actual shape of the house, right? This could predate anybody designing an actual house, but we want to know the location of it. Right, and then it's going to have what the line coming out of the house looks like. In this case, it's going to have details and specs for the septic tank. This one goes then to a pump station. That pump station then goes to a force line. Again, we're going to have details and specs for all of it. Coming around to this mound system, we're going to set the number of bedrooms and occupants for the house. And then around the well, you'll notice this red line. That red line is the isolation zone around the well. The isolation zone is going to mark where you cannot put a leach field. And the reason for it is this is our 2-year time of travel, right? So this is how much space we need given typical site conditions to ensure that we have 2 years of travel between where we're taking up water and where wastewater is going to get put out. Excuse me. Same thing around the leach field out here. We have this blue line. That's that leach field's isolation zone. So we would not permit a potable water supply inside that blue line. These two could cross, right? So this blue line can come into this well shield right up to the well, so long as the well itself is not in the isolation zone. Isolation zones can also cross property boundaries, right? So if this red line is representing a property boundary, right, and you can see that this crosses over, they are allowed to cross. If it is not for a replacement system, you need to inform the landowner who you're crossing into, and that is all. The state of Vermont would like to encourage neighbors to talk to each other. I didn't write, if I could have written or rewrite this legislation, but we encourages landowners to talk to each other. Usually that somehow involves us, because we'll get a lot of angry phone calls that somebody's trying to take their property. We have to explain it's not a taking, right? It's simply that you can't put a leach field right here. You can put your garden, you can put your house, you can put your driveway, you could put your playground. The only thing that can't happen is you can't put your wastewater system, your leach field here. Same thing if it was over here, you can't put your well over here, but everything else is good to go there.
Yeah. Oh shit.
I covered some of this, right? Do you have to have a potable water supply? We get this question a lot, especially right now with the ADUs. A lot of people are trying to build ADUs without a water supply. I can't explain it. So yes, in the state of Vermont has determined that for a building to be habitable, it has to have piped water to it. I get a lot that would like to go out and make their renters hand pump from somewhere and don't want to have to pipe it into the house. For rental units, water has to be tested annually. If a potable water supply is surface water, you may not rent your building or structure, but surface water is otherwise allowed in the state of Vermont. It just can't be rented out, which is becoming a big deal with some of these multi-unit houses or when people are adding the ADUs on. Collected rainwater may not be used as a potable water supply. Again, it's a very popular ask with some of the ADUs. They'd like to collect rainwater for their rented out ADU, and that is not allowed in Vermont. Where could you find, answers to your questions? A licensed designer can always answer your questions, or you can contact your local regional engineer. They all have assigned towns. Feel free to go onto the map, figure out who your local regional engineer is, or I can help you out and give them a call on anything. If it's a compliance question, I am the compliance manager. And if it's anything to do with the WW program above and beyond what we can ask, you can always contact the program manager, Bruce Douglas. Any other questions? I think I covered almost everything that I got asked to go. Looking down the list real quick, but I'll take questions.
I think there are some in the chat, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't see the chat. Let me see if I can bring that up.
Let's just have you ask the question rather than try to find the chat.
Oh, yeah. No, I think it's like we, in West Windsor, this is Jill Appel. In West Windsor, we've identified a few locations for potential affordable housing, and a couple of them will hook up nicely to town sewer. But we have a couple of other ones that we might want to look at alternative designs. So I'm just trying to figure out, maybe we should reach out to our regional engineer and talk about that in terms of our approach, because I think we need some design studies. And one of them has access to town sewer, but we have to build a pumping station. So an alternative system might actually work better. It's hard to say.
It may, right? So that would be a designer, and it's hard to say right now with prices fluctuating what would be the best choice at the moment. But working with the regional engineer and a local designer, they'll be able to do a cost comparison of your different options.
Okay. And then are there grants available for wastewater and potable water supply design?
There were. ARPA provided, the American Recovery Plan Act provided some money. ARPA money at this point is gone.
Right.
I have not been made aware of any other state funding. except for failed systems. We do have a loan program for failed systems. Otherwise, I'm not aware of any other state funding. Sometimes the USDA has money available, but again, it's hard on the shifting landscape to know exactly what's still funded and what is not.
Would CWSRF funding, would any of that be available?
It is not currently available in the state of Vermont.
Okay.
It can, right? It's not a federal decision. There are other states who use their revolving loan fund money in that way. Vermont has not chosen to do that at this point.
So I have one well question for you, because I heard you mention something about, like, if somebody wants to put in an ADU, they gotta make sure they have a potable water supply. Can that be a dug well?
It can be a dug well, yes.
Okay.
It can be a dug well, a spring, a driven well, a drilled well.
Okay.
The only option that it cannot be is surface water.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You may not be privy to this information, but these larger systems that could handle thousands, not hundreds, but thousands of gallons per day. What's, sort of a ballpark number that comes into your mind when you think about the cost of designing and constructing something like that?
I know of one of them, mostly because I worked with one of the high school classes. The high school that's actually across the river in New Hampshire, but takes the Vermont towns. Did a winter program on this, and we helped them with it, where they designed one for, was that Norwich?
Will it be
That was
either
not right.
Hanover High
Dresden
School or
District,
Rivendell
yeah.
High School?
Yes, that was the high school, and then they designed one for the Vermont elementary school as part of their winter project. And I know when they did that one, I believe they got quoted, and they were going to pull in some other things. So you were looking at one of the larger systems, and I believe they got quoted about 100 to 120,000 all in.
So that would be Marion Cross Elementary. That's a lot
Yes.
of capacity. And but that gives us all a sense that if we're dealing with, as we often do, property owners who may want to do 5 to 10 units in a rural area, and traditionally we'd tell them, well, the septic is going to control density, and good luck with that. I think now we can have a more optimistic view of the possible density there, and maybe it's a $50,000 system. But if it's prorated over 5 to 7 units, we now have the potential to get the yes.
Yes, and especially when you start looking at, the cost to operate per year is significantly less than if you were on like municipal water and wastewater, right? I pay in St. Johnsbury, I pay about 250 a quarter for municipal water and sewer, right? So it's about 1,000 a year, and suddenly over the course of a typical lifespan, which anything less than about 30 years from one of these would be considered excessively short. If you do that over 30 years, 7 or 10 units, you have quite a bit of room.
Yeah.
And then the other frame for me is that I'm realizing I have flexibility. You offered me insights into, oh boy, I don't want to have one well. Because in fact, for whatever reason, wells, anytime you share water, it drives people nuts. I don't know if they're so concerned about sharing waste, but certainly with water, these shared wells they seem to just draw out the worst in people. So,
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you for saying that. So that's been my experience, and we can, as planners, say, look, individual wells is really the way to go, but a combined wastewater system is also a way to make this happen.
Yes, absolutely. The water supplies, even if it's just between two houses, right? Somebody wants to put in the jacuzzi tub that then makes a noticeable drawdown in the other house, and we suddenly get some very angry phone calls, especially now with the drought conditions, that people are much more willing to control their own water than they are their wastewater. It is a lot easier to make community of varying sizes wastewater systems than it is any size shared water supply.
Okay, since piping up again, since we're talking ballpark figures, what's the approximate cost for a design project for a given piece of land?
Design, I'm assuming you're talking the licensed designer component.
Sure.
Typically range from about 2,000 to about 6,000.
Okay.
Is the typical cost range I'm hearing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, I thank everyone. I want to break.
Great.
Great.
Yeah, this
Thank you
was
so
great.
much.
Here on this side of the table, so in Scotney, we were enjoying every second of it, and I appreciate having a bonus Kristen presentation. Usually I just get one per year, and now I'm doubling up. So thank you.
Well, and feel free to invite me back. I'm happy to talk more if there's any particular aspect of this that you would like to delve deeper into.
If you're,
That's great.
So
if you're ever giving
will this
another
be
talk,
available?
I'd love to listen.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Will
can
this
go
be
ahead and make
available?
this. I can go ahead and I will send your hosts a copy of this slide presentation.
Great. Thank you very much.
No problem.
And thanks in general. It was very well done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kristen.
Have a great day, everybody.
Great, thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you.